Hey guys, and welcome to another ProGuides video. My name is Dan, and today we're going to give you a rundown of patch 7.27. In this guide, we'll be focusing on the item changes to give you a better idea of which ones we think might be really OP, as well as which heroes you should consider buying them on. Our question of the day this time is, what do you think is going to be the strongest item this patch? Now, let's get right into the video. Let's begin with the general changes. Hero kills are going to be worth more XP and gold as the base values for them have been increased. Assists are also worth a lot more in the later stages of the game since the gold multiplier for net worth went up. These changes are generally pointing towards better comeback mechanics, since if you're behind in the late game, the best way to come back is by trying to get kills while defending high ground and using buybacks. Speaking of buybacks, passive gold per minute went up from 85 to 95, and bounty runes are now a reliable gold source. This means that it's more likely that you'll have buybacks since you don't lose any reliable gold when you die, and the best way to get reliable gold is, you guessed it, passive gold and now bounty runes. Other notable changes to gold is that tower last hit bounties have been slightly reduced, and neutral creep stacking now gives more gold. This may seem minor, but both point towards an overall slower meta of more neutral camp stacks and less snowballing off of an early tower lead. There were also some minor map and creep camp changes. The most important thing you need to know for this is the ancient camps are now located in the triangle for Radiant and Dire, or the offlane jungles. Another important thing to note, especially as a mid laner, is that the neutral camps next to mid lane have been changed into small camps. Originally, it was a large camp to the left for Radiant and a medium camp to the right for Dire. Now, one of the biggest changes for this patch is that outposts can now only be stolen from the enemy if you have taken one of their tier 2 towers. What this means is that it's going to be much harder for teams to snowball an experience lead and control the entire map early on with both outposts. This is huge for heroes that want to sit back in their own jungle and farm up, as outposts give up a lot of control of your jungle. A more unnoticed change at first glance is that couriers will upgrade to fly at level 4 now rather than 5, as well as move 15% slower while carrying consumables. At first, this sounded like it wasn't such a big deal, but usually if the courier is carrying consumables, it's because you need that health or mana right then and there. This requires much more planning in your laning stage to buy regen preemptively, as it might not reach you in time before you either get kicked out of lane or die. Another thing that's especially important to know is that tier 1 and tier 2 towers now have increased attack speed, but with this comes reduced damage. While the overall DPS remains the same, it still changes how you will have to last hit under tower, so make sure to get a feel for this and be prepared to practice. In terms of draft changes, for most of us, we mainly play all pick, where you now will have 3 pick phases instead of 5. Each team will pick 2 heroes in the first phase, 2 heroes in the second phase, and the final pick for each time in the last phase. This means that your picks will have to be much more blind than before, so it's more important to think about what your teammates are going to pick and to try and have a more well-rounded draft rather than focusing on counter-picking the enemy. For the rest of the general changes, the fountain now has a fury swipe mechanic like Ursa, so sitting in the enemy fountain for too long will definitely get you killed. Along with that, we got some quality of life changes like neutral items not spawning when you're teleporting out, or getting neutral items with Meepo's clones. The last general change for 7.27 is that lifesteal and heal amplification stacks diminishingly instead of additively, and this was quite strong with some items such as Paladin's Sword and Satanic. Now, for the biggest changes of this patch, the items. We won't be going in depth for every item change, but we'll make sure to cover the important ones. First off, Necronomicon is nowhere near as broken as it used to be. You might still see this item occasionally picked up on specific heroes such as Beastmaster, but long gone are the days where Crystal Maidens are farming ancient camps in the jungle. So the build-up for Helm of the Dominator has changed to Helm of Iron Will, Crown, and a recipe, which makes it very convenient to build during the laning stage, especially on heroes that lack sustain and armor. Also, the creep that you dominate is much stronger, which can help some heroes farm and pressure earlier on in the game. We recommend trying this out on off-laners such as Enigma, Darkseer, and Beastmaster, who can best use the item to their advantage. Vladimir's offering now requires a Morbid Mask, Blades of Attack, Ring of Basilius, and Recipe. While this item no longer provides stats and only gives a 15% lifesteal aura, it now comes with an 18% bonus damage aura, which is quite a bit. Consider buying this on support or off-lane heroes, especially if your team relies heavily on physical attacks and is also very helpful in taking Roshan. Drum of Endurance now requires Crown, Sage's Mask, Windlace, and 600 gold recipe. While it no longer provides a passive aura, the price has been significantly reduced and the active stats have been increased. This item is a nice early game boost for carries such as Juggernaut or Terrorblade, who can benefit greatly from the attack speed boost. Mechanism and Guardian Greaves don't give all stats anymore, but do give a 3 armor aura as well as a 4 armor bonus to the owner of the item, which is great for grouping up with your team early on and just generally a good utility item to have. Blade Mail got an interesting change. So now instead of requiring a Robe of the Magi, it requires a recipe, and while the active damage return was reduced to 80%, it now passively reflects 20% of physical attack damage and 20 base reflect damage. We do have a new item in case you haven't heard. Blitz Knuckles are a basic item that gives 35 attack speed and costs 1,000 gold, and this builds into Monkey King Bar and Shadow Blade. Speaking of which, Monkey King Bar now requires a Javelin, Demon Edge, and Blitz Knuckles, which is a much better build-up than before. Also, the attack speed was increased from 10 to 35. While the damage was reduced by 10, it will still do more overall DPS because of the bonus damage from the Pierce passive combined with the increased attack speed. So you generally want this item on heroes that rely on auto-attacking and have relatively high attack speed, such as Bloodseeker, Troll Warlord, or Faceless Void. This item is especially useful when facing evasion and high armor heroes. Orchid Malevolence now costs 400 less gold. Mana regen and intelligence slightly reduced, but that isn't a big deal. This is great because the time at which you get this item is so important. If you get this item before the enemy has a Yule's, Manta Style, or any other defensive item to dispel it, it's so much more of a threat to the enemy. This item is a staple on Storm Spirit, Queen of Pain, and Nature's Prophet. Shadow Blade combines Shadow Amulet, which now costs 1,000 gold, Blitz Knuckles, and Broadsword. This build-up is much nicer for carries as they can take advantage of the better stats early on. Echo Saber is only applied on real heroes, which unfortunately means it does not work with Monkey King's ultimate. However, it now builds into Silver Edge instead of an ultimate orb. While Silver Edge's new price is sitting at 6,100, it is a much more viable late-game item due to the great stats it provides. This also means buying an early Echo Saber on some heroes makes more sense, since you can think of upgrading it as the game progresses. Bracer now gives 3 damage and 0.75 HP regen instead of magic resistance. Wraith Bands now give 1.5 armor and 5 attack speed, and Null Talismans now give 0.6 mana regen, and all of these items' stats were reduced by 1. Sage's Mask and Ring of Regen had their regen and price reduced, with recipe prices changed to make up for it. Soul Booster now has 10% magic resistance, which is great for the items that it builds into, like Bloodstone, which had its cooldown reduced from 250 to 85 seconds. This makes sense, that cooldown was way too long for no good reason. Octarine Core now requires a new item, Voodoo Mask, a basic item that costs 900 gold and gives spell lifesteal. It also requires a Soul Booster and a recipe. While Octarine Core no longer provides intelligence, this isn't really a big deal. Intelligence is probably the worst stat out of all of them, and the great thing is that it now costs 5,000 gold instead of 5,900, which means it isn't strictly a late game item anymore. You can pick this item up on heroes that like to sustain through long fights and are cooldown dependent, such as Death Prophet, Invoker, and Zeus. Veil of Discord had its stats reduced slightly, but at a 500 gold discount. This makes it much more viable as an early game item to boost your magic damage. Battle Fury now builds from Claymore instead of Mithril Hammer. While the stats were very slightly reduced, it also costs 220 gold less, and this item is mainly used as a farming tool, so the reality is that it's better for the heroes that buy it to get it a bit earlier, such as Anti-Mage. Crystallis now costs 200 gold less, while only providing 2 less damage. Satanic was an item that just needed to be nerfed, and now it has a 500 gold recipe. Meteor Hammers now built from Perseverance, Crown, and a recipe, with the cooldown reduced by 4 seconds and the stun duration decreased slightly. This is a decent buff to an item that's barely seen, as the buildup is a lot better. Spirit Vessel no longer provides a debuff aura, but had its active heal and heal reduction buff to make up for it. This is also to make up for the fact that there are more items that provide heal reduction, such as Shiva's Guard, with its passive providing 25% at a 100 gold higher cost. While the DPS has been increased on Spirit Vessel from 35 to 45, overall it appears that removing the heal aura was a big nerf. It might not be the best idea to build a casual Spirit Vessel anymore if there aren't hero counters that prompt it. Some classic heroes where the item is probably needed include Alchemist, Morphling, Underlord, Centaur, and Husker. 2,100 gold on top of an urn just wouldn't appear to be worth the investment. Dagon now builds from a Belt of Strength, Robe of the Magi, and Band of Elvenskin, and provides all stats instead of intelligence. Despite the change, this item will still mostly be a niche item picked up on heroes such as Tinker or Pugna. Heart of Tarrasque had its cost increased by 250, now passively provides you with 1% max health regeneration, 50% health regen amp while out of combat, and had its strength reduced by 5. So this basically means that this item is better when in combat. You do not buy this item for the regen it provides out of combat. Eye of Skadi has gotten yet another buff, with the heal reduction being increased to 40% and the attack as well as move slow increased by 5. In addition, Ultimate Orb now costs 100 less gold, overall reducing the cost of Skadi by 200. Obviously, this is great versus heroes that rely on health regen, but it's also great against ranged heroes and heroes you want to kite, especially by using spell immunity. We believe this will shift Eye of Skadi even more into the spotlight of the 7.27 meta. Linkens Sphere now costs 300 less gold, although still a situational pickup. Besides that, there were some minor balances to the most and least purchased items. Tome of Knowledge now costs 75 gold, and Smoke of Deceit is now at 50. This is a huge boost to supports, especially in the early game when you're still struggling to scrounge up enough gold for those boots. Finally, the neutral items mostly had some minor balance changes. One important change to note is that you can only get one consumable item per tier, which means for tier 1 either a royal jelly or a mango tree, and for tier 3 it will be between a greater fairy fire or repair kit. Another interesting change is to Pirate Hat, which now guarantees a bounty rune spawn on a 40-second cooldown. This is pretty crazy to think about when you consider that a bounty rune past 60 minutes gives each hero 160 gold, netting a total team net worth increase of 800 per bounty. The most impactful changes to neutral items are the changes to Illusionist Cape and Repair Kit. Illusionist Cape just had a minor number tweak, increasing the incoming damage of the illusion from 150% up to 200%, which will hopefully help us more easily recognize them as illusions. The inclusion of a 60-second cooldown on Repair Kit is arguably the biggest change overall to neutral items. We've all been there trying to make a meaningful push out of a few dead heroes, only to be saddened by the sound of a Repair Kit on a tier 3 tower or barracks. So, to give you our final thoughts on this patch, we think that the game has been slowed down quite a bit, with more potential for comebacks, making the game a lot harder to snowball and choke out the enemy very early on. This makes heroes that scale more into the late game much more viable, as you'll have more time and space to come online. The item balances also give players a lot of freedom in their item decisions, since there aren't necessarily any clear pickups that you just have to buy every game. This is a very exciting time to see how the meta will change. As IceFrog himself has stated, this is only the first half of major changes to come, with a patch focused on hero changes shortly to follow. With that said, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, then please hit that like, comment, and subscribe button to be notified of our next vid, and we'll see you all next time.